Alright there guys, and welcome back to a brand new video. Today, yes, it's another list video. Haven't done list videos this close together probably ever. But today, we're going for, this list video is going to be on my top 5 Uncharted games. As you guys know, Uncharted is my favourite video game franchise of all time. I'm collectively over all 5 games, I think I've beaten the Uncharted series at least 30 times. And of course, I'm going to be going over the 5 main console games, meaning Uncharted Golden Abyss is not eligible for this list because I never played it, as I never owned a PS Vita. I only ever owned the original PSP. So, let's start with number 5. Coming in number 5, as much as I love all 5 Uncharted games, there is a worst. And the worst Uncharted game out of the 5 is Uncharted 3, Drake's Deception. Uncharted 3 is a game that has a really good multiplayer. Right, out of the first 3, out of Uncharted 2 and 3, 3 has a better multiplayer than 2. But the story mode in 3 feels very disconnected, if you get what I mean. Like, the locations we go to, we keep jumping locations. Like, we're in London, 1 minute we're in London, then we're in France, then we're in Yemen. Like, there's no real... They don't feel connected, really. The story feels a bit disconnected, but it does go into Nathan Sully's past a lot more than we've ever seen before, which is good, because we did want to know some information on their backstory. The gameplay of Uncharted 3 is very smooth. The gameplay, I have nothing to complain about there. Its gameplay is very fun and enjoyable. But the main villains of the game, Marlowe and Talbot, were not very interesting. It's a bit like Uncharted 1, where the main henchman, the right-hand man of the main villain, actually turns out to be the main villain. And the original main villain dies before the end, before the final boss. Yeah, Talbot is not a very interesting character whatsoever. And the final boss fight with Talbot is very, very easy and short. There's a huge build up, but the actual fight itself is not very hard. Or impressive, for that matter. But one thing Uncharted 3 does incredibly well is the set pieces, such as in the chateau in France. It's burning down. You're running out. You're trying to escape a burning castle, which is pretty cool. We never had something like that before. Or the plane flying over the the Arubicali Desert, where you're in the plane and then you fall out of it, grabbing onto a piece of cargo that also fell out of the plane, and parachuting just in time to survive. Yeah, Uncharted 3's multiplayer has good co-op missions and difficult to master PvP modes, but it is enjoyable. So that's why it comes in at number 5. Coming in at number 4 is the last Uncharted game we ever received, which is Uncharted: The Lost Legacy, which is the only game where Nathan Drake makes 0 appearance in whatsoever. Yep, we have Chloe and Nadine from Uncharted 4 as the main characters of this game, where they are looking for something They are looking for an ancient tusk that Chloe's father happened to also be looking for many years before, but never found it. And they are also battling with Asav, who is the main villain of Uncharted: The Lost Legacy. He's one of the weakest villains in the whole series. He really is. He's one of the, if not the weakest villain in the whole series. Not as in terms of he's easy to beat, because he's not, but in terms of his actual character. He's quite easy. He's quite a weak character in terms of what his motives are. And he just randomly has an army for no reason, and just happens to be going for the same treasure Chloe and Nadine are going for. But what we do get a bit of backstory into Chloe's past, which is something in Uncharted 2 and 3 we never got. We found out that Chloe's nationality is actually Indian, and not Australian. She was born in India, but she and her mother had to leave because India was a bit of a war zone when she was young. So they fled to Australia, where they lived for a long time, which is why in the Uncharted games Chloe has an Australian accent, despite being Indian. The gameplay is as good. The gameplay is as good as ever because it's the same gameplay as Uncharted 4. So that's not changed. And it brings back all the features Uncharted 4 had, including the spike, the climbing spike, the grappling hook, everything crumbles beneath your feet. A puzzle that in my Let's Play took me 21 goddamn minutes to do. Literally, go back to my Uncharted Lost Legacy Let's Play, look for the episode that's, I think it's like 40 minutes or so long. It takes me 21 minutes. Over half the episode is me trying to figure out how to do a puzzle without looking at a guide. It was quite annoying, but I finally got done over it. And the final boss of Uncharted: The Lost Legacy also isn't great. Asav is not a very good boss. You just fight him enough until he gets his legs trapped under the bomb that he had on his train. But in the final episode of my series, I died to him quite a lot, which was quite annoying. Needing precision timing to dodge his attacks to then hit him. And that's why Uncharted: The Lost Legacy comes in at number 4. Coming in at the number 3 spot is the game that started it all. Uncharted: Drake's Fortune, the very first game in the series, which on the 17th of November this year, the game will be turning 12 years old. It can literally be considered a retro game now, because it's over 10 years old. Uncharted 1 is a short game. It's the shortest game in the series, but that's because it was not our first attempt at anything quite like this, where it wasn't a cartoon-looking platformer. They went for something completely different, a more realistic game, and it worked. Boy, did it work. The gameplay is very iffy, but that makes sense. It's the first game of the series, so it would have it would make sense to have the worst gameplay out of all of them. But the actual story of the game is actually quite good, and the actual environments you explore are really nice as well. I know that the island is predominantly the only area in the whole game, but because the island is so big, you feel like you are actually going to different areas completely different areas, but you're actually still on the exact same island you were on before. Some of the environments, such as Chapter 4, all the greenery that's around when you're looking for Elena, Then Chapter 5, that big fortress, is a cool place to explore. We have Chapter 12, which can be incredibly frustrating when you're on the jet ski and you don't have the the grenade launcher anymore. You just have a normal pistol. And the final level and yet again, the final boss kind of disappoints a bit, as Navarro is not a great final boss. But the final level is dodging his one-shot kill shotgun to take down all the enemies that are in the surrounding area that you're in. So you do have to be careful where you aim, but it is possible to beat Navarro quite easily. And the final boss is just taking cover a few times, hitting his shotgun out of his hand, him throwing you to the floor, you getting back up, knocking him out, pushing off the helicopter that crashed onto the giant ship, and with a rope it was attached to round his leg, taking him down to the ocean to drown, which ends up drowning him. One thing Uncharted 1 does really well is it's quite the like sarcasm, the comedy that they had, the few comedy moments they have in the game, such as these just one-liners that are just one word. Where in Chapter 4, Nate has just got past the area, or just got past the... If you guys have played the Uncharted 1 demo all the way back in 2007, you know the gate you jump off and then the demo ends? It's the section directly after that, where you're climbing around, and if you land in the water, you die. It's insta-death. Just before you start climbing around, Nate looks up and there's like a skeleton on a cross, tied to like a cross made of spikes, and Nate just looks up at it and says, "Cheery." Just one-liners like that, and one-word liners like that, and just one-liners, such as when Nate says to Elena in Chapter 11, "We either rescue him, or we beat the crap out of him." Hell, I might just beat the crap out of him anyway. These one-liners are what makes the writing in the game, and makes the writing in the game so good. And that's why it comes in at number 3. Now, you guys know what number 2 and number 1 are, but you don't know what order they're in. Coming in at the number 2 spot is the last main Uncharted game we ever received, Uncharted 4: A Thief's End. Ever since Uncharted 3 came out, we were desperately hoping for Uncharted 4. And then we finally got to see gameplay of it in E3 2014. And at the end of it said 2015 when the game would come out. Then we got to E3 2015, we saw even more gameplay of it. But the date was pushed back to 2016. It was pushed back to March 2016, then April 2016, then pushed back again for a third time to May 2016. So Uncharted 4, or 3-year anniversary, is happening very, very soon. In just a few weeks, 2 weeks, in 16 days. That is how long it is till Uncharted 4's 3-year anniversary. So, Uncharted 4 has the best gameplay out of any of the Uncharted games. In terms of the shooting, the climbing, the combat, everything, Uncharted 4 has the best in gameplay wise. The story is incredible as well, with the game being less linear than any Uncharted game before it. It's the least linear and most open world as you can get for an Uncharted game that we got. Which of course was a nice change. We got to which encouraged more exploring, which is something in Uncharted 1, 2 and 3 you can't really do that much, can you? The villains of Uncharted 4, Rafe and Nadine, are not the worst in the series by any means, no. I guess Rafe is more interesting than some of the other villains because he knew Nate in his past. Like, he's somebody from Nate's past that came back just like his brother Sam did. And the story of trying to find Henry Avery's cross, which would eventually lead them to Henry Avery's treasure, while Nate, Sam are racing Nate, Rafe and Nadine to get there first. They introduced, of course, new features such as the climbing spike, the grappling hook, which a lot of games in 2015 and 2016 introduced grappling hooks, or games returning that already had grappling hooks in came out in those years. I don't know why, but that's what seemed to happen. Oh dear. Stupid phone. I wish it would go away. Anyway, we've got shut up. Wow, that's the longest when I'm recording a video does that have to happen? The phone never rings for that long. Anyway, back to what I was saying. The story of them always fighting and running into each other occasionally, quite often, is a trait that Uncharted started to do more throughout the series, where the heroes and the villains ran into each other quite a few times. And of course the plot twist in the final boss is cool, where Nadine betrays Rafe and leaves him and Nate to die in the burning pirate ship, where the final boss is definitely the most interesting of the series. It's one of the more interesting final bosses, where Nate and Rafe have a sword fight as the final boss. Henry Avery and Thomas Two's swords are what they use to fight. And it was definitely a final boss. I was not how I expected the final boss to go, but it's better than the Talbot one. Simple reason, it requires more skill, and it's a bigger set piece. It's a set piece of a burning pirate ship, and instead of trying to escape, they have to fight, which leads to Rafe going a little bit insane, and Nate and Sam just barely escaping. Now, Uncharted 4's multiplayer is very good as well. The only downside I have to it is not releasing a co-op mini adventure mode, which Uncharted 2 and 3 both had, where you and up to 2 more friends could play a little mini story that's completely separate from the main game, co-op together, where you were able to maybe see previous villains of the series, or play as the villains in some other way, in something completely separate that's not related to the main story in any way. But the set pieces the game feeling a bit slow in the first half is what brings it down a little bit, which is why it's not number 1. Which means the number 1 spot can only go to one game. Not only is it my favourite Uncharted game, but it's my favourite game of all time, and that is Uncharted 2 Among Thieves. This game is amazing. This game is as close to perfect as any game I have ever played. It's got an amazing story. It's got great dialogue, great and funny dialogue, great characters. The story of Nate, Chloe and Elena and Sully looking for Marco Polo's lost fleet, which Zoran Lazarevic and Harry Flynn are chasing you all the way there. Lazarevic is is the most interesting villain out of any of them in the series, because he's not afraid to kill off people in his own army. Like, he has no mercy. He will execute anybody if they try to stand in his way. The set pieces are great in the game, such as the game starting off in a derailed train hanging off the edge of a mountain in the Himalayas. And that's just the start of the game, with the first half of the game being what led up to that moment in the first place, which is what Uncharted 4 did as well, which did not actually surprise me. I had a feeling it would do that. Uncharted 2 is of course the longest Uncharted game out of any of them, with a total of 26 chapters, with Uncharted 1, 2 and 3 having only 22, and Uncharted Lost Legacy, with being a lot even shorter, having a total of 9 chapters, I think. But yeah, Uncharted 2... one thing about Uncharted 4, it gives us a lot more backstory on Nate and Sam, on why Sam had been gone for so long, and what they were like when they were even younger than that. But in Uncharted 2, we have a very much improved gameplay from the first game, including climbing, shooting, combat, everything for Uncharted 2 was improved from Uncharted 1. It, of course, was the first ever Uncharted game to introduce multiplayer, which of course became a main component of the Uncharted series, with 3 and 4 also having multiplayer. It had a good roster of characters in multiplayer, 3 very fun co-op adventure missions, which I think was probably a huge success when they brought in, when you go through sections of the original game, of the main game, but for a different reason than you were in the single player. Uncharted 2 showed that if anyone thinks single player games are going anywhere, they're not. And well, Uncharted 4 this decade proved exactly that as well. Single player games ain't going anywhere. They're still just as relevant and enjoyable as they ever have been. And last year, God of War, Marvel Spider-Man and God of War proved single player games are still very much one of the best types of games that are out there. But whether it's you're hanging off the derailed train, you're running through the train, you're in the mountains of Tibet, you're fighting off Yetis, you're being chased by Lazarevich round a tree with explosive sap that blows up if shot. The final boss of Uncharted 2 is the most unique, because it involves Nate running away from Lazarevich and having to shoot this blue tree sap that's like resin that explodes if shot at. And that's the only way Lazarevich can be defeated. Shooting him will do nothing. You have to blow him up. And grenades are a godsend in that mission. Literally, in that boss fight, grenades are a lifesaver. They're so helpful. And then you run off with the purple Shambhala Guardians chasing you and just barely surviving and getting out of there. The puzzles in the Uncharted series become more complex over... They try to make them more complex over the game, over the series, to make you think a bit harder, and actually it requires a bit of brain power in order to figure out what you have to do. But I don't really have any complaints for Uncharted 2. It's my favourite game of all time. I've beaten it over 15 times as well. And that's why it comes in at number 1. Alright, I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode. If you have, please be sure to give it a like. Subscribe if you are new to the channel. Follow me on all my social medias. And until next time, guys, catch you later.